Hi, everybody. Mitch Tanenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. This is the security news update for January 8th, 2023. That is the first security news update of the year. Happy New Year. On the security and privacy front, Synology, who most people know for their storage devices, also makes network devices, and they just released a score 10 out of 10 patch for their VPN router. So if you're running their software, then I would definitely recommend updating now. And then Rackspace and their continuing saga of their exchange fiasco, which they now say was caused by a zero-day exploit, and that certainly could be the case. Says that they're not going to turn on their hosted exchange environment ever again. They have said that hosted exchange does not represent a significant part of their revenue. It only represents, I believe, about $30 million. And so from their perspective, as a way to mitigate things and not be in this boat again, they're just not going to offer a hosted exchange. What they have done is given their about 30,000 small businesses sort of a kind of a crappy office license. And I don't know how long the license is for, probably 1 year would be my guess. Is a web-only version of Office. And beyond that, you're kind of on your own. They do say that more than half of the customers have gotten back some of their data. So that means it's kind of a 50-50 crapshoot if you're were one of their customers. And I have talked to other customers, and they said they are seriously considering just leaving Rackspace as a result of the way they handle this. And I suspect there will be a significant fallout from Rackspace, a lot more than the 30 million that this segment represents. And I'm sure that there will be other class action lawsuits that happen as well. So this is not over for Rackspace. They're still trying to recover people's data to whatever degree they can, and also do damage control. So we shall see what happens there. Next, in the reference department, the European Union has released their Network and Information Security Directive version 2. The first version came out about 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. This is a new and upgraded version. It covers about 10 times as many businesses. And remember, people say, well, I don't really care what the EU does because I don't do business in the EU. And for a lot of companies, that's true. But the problem is, do your customers do business in the EU? And what we're seeing some of is customers saying, we don't really care whether it applies to you or not. It applies to us. And so therefore the trickle down theory says it also applies to you. On the other hand, we can't force you to do that. But if you don't do that and you don't certify in writing that you're doing that, we'll just find a different vendor. So, that kind of puts you in that boat, whether you like it or not. Another score 10 out of 10 bug, we've seen more of these, it's kind of interesting, is in the Linux kernel. There is a patch available to this. That's good. This is in the KSMBD module, which is the thing that handles Windows file sharing, SMB3. And there's some arguments about whether this should have been in the kernel in the first place, but it is. And so therefore, if you're running Linux and the distribution that you have supports KSMBD, then you should patch quickly. Also, CISA added 2 new Veeam backup vulnerability in their catalog. So this would probably be a good time to go patch that if you're running Veeam. And also Qualcomm, the big chip maker, has announced that they have patched 22 bugs in their firmware. This is in the Snapdragon chip, amongst others. And they 2 of these bugs target automotive folks. One is in power line communications, and 5 in the UEFI firmware, which is the secure boot on ARM processors. So the challenge is, for most people, they can't directly go to Qualcomm and get patches. They have to go to their manufacturer, but just kind of keep an eye out and patch when you can. In the legislative and legal affairs section, the Department of Justice actually arrested, as opposed to just putting out a warrant, The hacker supposedly behind the Mango Markets platform heist that it was kind of a pump and dump scheme. They went off and did some machinations which allowed them to leverage the actual amount of money they had by jacking up the price of crypto artificially by buying a lot of it, and then they leveraged that and used that to run away with a bunch of money that didn't belong to them. But they catch the guy in Puerto Rico, so that's kind of cool that they actually caught the folks. And speaking of lawsuits, the first lawsuit against LastPass has been filed. I'm sure there'll be more. This is kind of I guess I don't know all the details, but from what I can tell at this point, it seems like a pretty oddball lawsuit. What this guy is saying is that the disclosure was unreasonably delayed, which I don't think is the case, but that's my opinion, woefully inadequate and directly contributed to the damages suffered by the plaintiff. The plaintiff claims he lost $50,000 in Bitcoin due to what I always say is the plaintiff's crappy and lazy security practices, because if I had $50,000 worth of assets or more than that, I would guess, and I was going to protect it with a password in a password manager, that was the sum total of my protection. Because clearly, if he had more protections, then no matter what happened to his password, nothing bad would have occurred to him in terms of his cryptocurrency. But we shall see. I think LastPass has been pretty transparent about things, and I think there's some things that they didn't do that they should have done, like encrypting non-password fields. But for people who are using it as a password manager, I think, and had a strong master password, then I think that the risk is pretty low. Also, on the legal front, Twitter is kind of getting buffeted around by everybody because it's nice to pick on people when they're down, I guess. So Germany reached out and met with Elon the other day and explained to him that they expect Twitter to continue to fight disinformation. Now, he's got a challenge in that he says he wants an open communications platform, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. On the other hand, he also doesn't want to run afoul of European law, and so I mean he could choose, and clearly he could do this, to just ban Twitter in Europe. I don't think he's going to do that because it's probably one of the largest Twitter markets, and he's trying to figure out how to break even and make money from his investment of $40 billion. But he could do that. In the meantime, he's got to figure out how he can keep the regulators happy. And even if, ultimately, the regulators find him and they do all this stuff they're going to do, and he wins, it's still a huge distraction and probably something that will scare off advertisers, which is probably a bigger problem for him. In the data breaches department, we have a bunch of them this week. McGraw-Hill, the big book publisher and student software publisher, apparently left 2 Amazon S3 storage buckets unprotected, one with production data and one with non-production data. 117 million files, 22 terabytes worth of data. Not a great thing. This includes student grades and student papers and a bunch of other stuff. The researchers who found this unprotected bucket reached out to McGraw-Hill on June 13th, June 15th, June 20th, 27th. They also reached out to CERT, the Computer Emergency Response Team, on June 27th and July 4th. They contacted McGraw-Hill 9 times with no response. And finally, on July 7th, they contacted Amazon. And as curiously is often the case, magically the problem got solved. I don't have any inside information, but I suspect that Amazon just kind of blocked the website, and all of a sudden, what happened? Oh my God, I guess we ought to do something about this. Yeah, I'll talk about this at the end. I mean, there's some legitimate issues here, but in Amazon's defense, when you see Amazon S3 bucket hacked, you don't go off and ask, well, is this Amazon's fault or is this the user's fault? clearly this having buckets that are publicly visible with no password is the user's fault, but people will blame Amazon. So they're really motivated to go do something that gets people's attention really quickly. Also in the breach department, locomotive maker WebTech, and they're a big player. I'd never heard of them before this, but they have 23,000 locomotives operating today. They move 20% of the world's freight. They have 25,000 employees. They're a big company. They operate in 50 countries. They were hacked. And again, this is the example of incident response gone badly. They were hacked in March. They detected it in June. So it took them about 3 months to figure out the bad guys were in there. The hackers published the data in August. So between June and August, I'm not sure what they were doing. The hackers are probably negotiating what they were doing. The company finished supposedly reviewing the stolen data in November, and the lawyers are just now telling people about it. So, from March to December, January is not a good time window. I am sure there will be lawsuits. I'm sure regulators will be watching them, and so you gotta. And this is a challenge for companies, right? You got to figure out how do we respond to this quickly. The lawyers, want to go off and make it go away. You can't do that because it will come out one way or the other, and but you got to do it in a timely fashion. And we're seeing the windows that the law allows, assuming you don't want to be prosecuted, are getting smaller and smaller. So you got to really have your act together. And part of that is making sure that you know what is where, data maps. You have enough information to be able to determine where the hackers went and what they stole. And all that, I'd say a large number of businesses don't have that information in a way that's easily obtainable. Also in the breach department, hackers tried to convince Twitter to go off and pay them. They had apparently 400 million account information records. They have posted 235 million of those for free. Story is now that it's likely that will make Twitter the target of a federal investigation. The data isn't super sensitive, but it is sensitive enough to launch phishing attacks against people. So we shall see where that goes. But it's just the hacking continues unabated. On the other hand, here's kind of some good news. Well, sort of good news. Air France and KLM have a joint airline loyalty card, and they notified some of their customers that their accounts had been hacked and they should change their passwords. But they also said that they detected the compromise quickly enough that the hackers were not able to steal any points, which is what they do, redeem points. So that's kind of the good news. The bad news is probably people use crappy passwords, and that's how the hackers got in. But on the other side, the KLM and Air France detected it quickly enough that the hackers weren't able to do any damage. So that's kind of nice. And lastly, in the breach department, the Texas Metropolitan Area EMS, which serves about 15 different cities in Tarrant County, which is where Fort Worth is located, if you're not familiar with Texas geography. The good news is that the ransomware attack only took the agency down for about 48 hours, which, of course, if you're waiting for an ambulance, that's a problem. But I'm assuming they have emergency procedures for dispatching ambulances under those circumstances. Only took them down for 48 hours. That's pretty good. But they don't know what the hackers took. So that's bad. That goes back to that data map and logging and auditing I was talking about a minute ago. And ransomware actors have increasingly been successfully going after critical infrastructure. And that's part of why the Europeans are just now releasing NIS2, that Network and Infrastructure Security Directive update. So you kind of can hope you don't get hacked. I suppose that's one strategy. Or you can go off and say, I need to up my game, improve my incident response capability, and improve my monitoring and alerting capabilities. But obviously all that costs money. We understand that. still, it may be one of those cases of pay me now or pay me later, and which one is less painful. Next, we're seeing the feds in particular following up what private industry has been doing for years, which is, if the information is public, it's fair game. So, they are they have something called continuous vetting, and a lot of businesses do the same thing, big businesses, where they're constantly looking at social media to see if there's something going on that would make them concerned about their employee. And if they do, then that generates an alert and they deal with it. So now the government is making that a little bit more official on their side, and the separation between work and play is really getting pretty dicey at this point. Also, Louisiana has become the first state to require a government ID to visit an adult website. While a lot of people might say this is a good thing, and that's hard to argue with. You don't want kids watching porn. I've never seen a kid make a fake ID, and of course these websites are outsourcing this to somebody else, and I'm sure the third party, whoever they hire, is doing that based on cost, right? So I'm sure their security is super robust, and all this information that they're collecting is safe and secure, like a 3-year-old's piggy bank. The websites, at least one that I saw written up about, is trying very hard to distance themselves from any responsibility for this. But basically, this is what the law requires. We've outsourced this to a third party, and don't complain to us if something bad happens. We're just following the law, which is what they're doing. Will other websites, other states do this? I don't know. Will this law be struck down as unconstitutional because it's an obstruction to interstate commerce? Don't know that either. But we'll just have to see. Right now, the law is in effect. Assuming that you're one of those people that owns a car, get ready to patch your car. Spoiler alert, maybe not. But if you have a Ferrari or a Rolls or a Porsche or a BMW, then you can probably afford to patch your car. But if you have a Ford or a Toyota, a bunch of other cars, you probably need to patch it too. What the car makers are saying is we're not patching older cars at all. Yes, there is an exploit. Yes, we know it's possible to exploit, but we're not going to patch them. So exactly where that cutoff is for any given car maker, any given model, probably depends on the tech and how much ability the car maker has to actually fix it, and what it would cost, right? If you have to go off and replace everybody's key fob for free for every car that you ever made, that's a problem. So we shall see where that goes. But what's likely to happen is the car makers will go off and replace the minimum number of key systems that they can get away with from the feds, and the rest will have to be covered by insurance, which means if you don't have the right kind of insurance, you're on your own. And then the other side of that is that your premiums will go up because all these cars are being stolen. Now that the exploit is public, it's even worse because apparently at least some of these exploits are not hard to do at all. That's a real challenge. In the Security News Bites department, we're seeing more FTX cybercrime. The feds are investigating yet another 300 or 400 million that disappeared right after the company declared bankruptcy. Slack has now joined. Slack is part of Salesforce. Joined Okta and many other companies in losing control of their source code. Of course, everybody says losing control of our source code is no big deal because, after all, our source code is perfect, has no bugs in it at all. So, Tesla and others are at risk from a website attack, which, by the way, anybody that runs a website should check on this. It's called cross-origin resource sharing, and it allows you to go off and share internal resources and obtain code from outside. But you're supposed to be able to do that in a controlled manner. And apparently, if you don't implement it right, that's not the case. Next, Ireland says Facebook cannot bury their consent to steal your data inside the user agreement, because there's no way for you to opt out, because you have to agree to the user agreement in order to use the software, and that violates Article 6 of GDPR if there's no way to opt out for them to steal your data. Now they're fighting with the European Commission over this, they being Ireland. So we shall see how the courts wind up on this side. I think it seems to me that it makes sense. Clearly, Facebook does not want you to opt out, and they don't want another Apple on their hands where they're losing a bunch of revenue because the user interface has to allow people to choose, and you can't say, well, gee, if you don't choose, we're just going to opt you in. In the case of Apple, it required a clear choice on the part of the user, which Apple doesn't care about because they don't make that much money from their ad revenue. Stay tuned for the next item. But still, this is, the regulators are getting tighter and tighter, and whether this one, works or it doesn't work, the next one may work, and then it's going to continue to fight. And also, France fined Apple $8 million over how they put a checkbox, which is the privacy checkbox, on their website. So, that's an interesting challenge for our buddies at, again, it's another one of these things where it gives Apple the option to steal your data. And obviously they would rather send you personalized ads, what they call that, data-driven ads, because they make more money. In all fairness to these guys, it's about the money, and if they can't get the money, then that's a problem for them. And going back to, and I know this is a little bit long today, going back to this whole issue of what happens. We see this time and again where employees get alerted to a situation, and basically they don't know what to do. This is the case of McGraw-Hill, where the researchers tried to get a hold of them 9 times, and apparently nobody responded. We saw this with the Democratic National Committee when the FBI tried to contact them after the elections in 2016, telling them that they'd been hacked, and they ignored them too. So the question is, what would your employees do if they got an email or a phone call from somebody claiming that you guys had been hacked? It's easy enough to go off and test this, have somebody call or write an email from outside and send it to some random person inside the organization, or multiple people at different times. Don't go off and blanket the place with 100 emails, because that will look like a spam attack. And see what your employees do. If you don't get the right answer, then that's a training issue. So it's pretty easy to fix. And if you need help with that, obviously give us a call. If you need help with anything from a cybersecurity perspective, give us a call. And until next time, thanks for listening.
Turnkey Cybersecurity and Privacy Solutions offers the complete cybersecurity program for small to medium-sized businesses. They include everything needed to secure your business and meet compliance requirements. Visit our website at turnkeycybersecurityandprivacysolutions.com to learn more.